Hi there, it's Stefan from Everything Photography. Today we're going to do the part 2 of my comparison between the Sony 24-105 and the Tamron 28-75mm. I did one comparison 2 years ago, but since then Tamron made several important firmware updates of the lens. They also increased the price a little bit, so now the two lenses will be even closer than they were 2 years ago. So I decided to repeat my test. In general, as the first test, I see that the Tamron definitely is sharper in the center, but the Sony rules in the corners with small exceptions, and you'll see. So I'm starting from f2.8 for the Tamron and the Sony at f4, which is the maximum open aperture for two lenses, and let's see what the results are. Okay, let's zoom in the center. I think here the two lenses are pretty much the same. Maybe I would say that the Tamron is a bit sharper, but I think they're the same. You have to really split here to say which one is better. I think they're pretty much the same. Let's check the bottom left corner, which surprisingly Tamron looks a little bit better than the Sony, or they're even, or the Tamron is just a bit better. That cannot be said though for the other three corners, the top left, the top right, and the bottom right, which, as you can see, the Sony is significantly sharper. When I first saw the results, because they were so different, I decided to redo the test and the setup in general. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't misalign the books and the camera is closer to the right or the left side, because I was looking at that focus shifting from left to right, but all the books were correctly aligned and the camera was at exact 90-degree angle, so the setup was correct. As you can see in the bottom left corner, the Tamron performs just a bit better. So let's switch the Tamron to f4 as well. Now both lenses are at f4. And the same thing in the center, the Tamron is slightly sharper. Not too much, but it is sharper. At the bottom left, the Tamron gains a little bit sharpness. You can see that Barnes & Noble text is definitely sharper on the Tamron side. Although the very extreme corner, you can see the R, the copyright, and the number 4. The Sony is probably a bit better in the very, very extreme corner. And as with the first comparison, you see the top left corner, the top right corner, and the bottom right corner, the Sony is sharper. I can see the text here, the Gramercy, the crown. Let's switch to f5.6 for the two lenses. Zooming in, we see the Tamron is again slightly sharper in the center. I wouldn't say that it has more contrast, but it's definitely a bit sharper. The bottom left corner, again you see the Barnes & Noble text is sharper on the Tamron, but the very extreme corners, the Sony already gained advantage. And that continues to be the case with the face. Those extreme corners, the Sony is sharper. So again, I did the setup several times just to make sure that everything is correct. And what I found is that you see after 35-50mm it actually shifts, so the Tamron is not longer sharper at the bottom left corner. It switches to a different corner, and you'll see that. Let's switch to f8, and I don't even have to continue after that. f11, the two lenses are pretty much identical in all focal lengths. I'll just compare up to f8, so don't waste your time. You can see all the pictures on the website. There is a detailed article with all the files and all comparisons, so you can spend as much time as you want. At 28mm, I just find that, as you saw, the Tamron exceeds in the center and in the bottom left corner, without the very extreme part, and it's definitely softer and blurrier in all corners. I can add f11 just at least for 28mm, so you can see. But at f11 I think the two lenses are pretty much identical everywhere. I mean, not everywhere, but in the center and at the bottom left corner. As here we still see the Sony sharper. Here as well. It's not much of a difference. The bottom right corner already looks really good on the Tamron. So let's switch to 35mm. Okay, so I loaded the two lenses at 35mm. On the left is Sony at f4, on the right side is the Tamron at f2.8. Let's zoom in the center and see how the two lenses compare at 35mm. Here I definitely see that the Tamron, you can see the yellow and pink text, it's sharper, it's definitely sharper on the Tamron side. You see the green rabbit is also sharper. So the center, even if at 2.8 the Tamron is just significantly sharper than the Sony. Let's see the bottom left corner. As I told you, you can see that already at 35 the Tamron shifts and the Sony is now sharper at the bottom left. The Tamron lost its sharpness at that corner, and the top left corner Sony sharper. Same thing, although a little, very slightly, the Sony sharper at the top right corner. And let's see the bottom right. It's a bit hard to tell here. I think the Sony is a bit sharper, looking at the faces and that G that starts here. I think the Sony is a little bit sharper. So let's switch the Tamron to be at f4 as well. Now the two lenses are at f4. In the center you see at f4 both lenses, the Tamron is just significantly sharper than the Sony. Let's see the corners now. It's definitely advantage of the Sony in the corners. Although the top right corner I see that the Tamron improves sharpness. Okay, let's switch to f5.6 on both lenses. The Sony started to look sharper in the center, but still the Tamron has advantage, even if it f5.6. The bottom left corner, the Sony wins. It wins at the top left corner too. You can see those big letters here. They're way sharper on the Sony side. Now we can start seeing that the Tamron is sharper on the top right corner now. Before at 28mm it was the bottom left, now switched to the top right. You can see those MONOV text, how the Tamron is sharper. That baby text too, animal here. Although at the very extreme corner, probably Sony equals the Tamron, but it's still, I think, the top right corner, the Tamron gets sharper at this focal length. At the bottom right, the Sony wins. So let's switch to f8. Sorry, I found it. So let's zoom in. Yeah, at f8, same thing. At 35mm, Tamron is sharper in the center. Looking at the corners, I see the same thing as before. At 35mm, Tamron shines in the center and at the top right corner a little bit. The other three corners, Sony is definitely sharper. As you can see, I haven't changed the camera position or something, or I did not detach the camera, just changing the lenses. So everything is the same between the different focal lengths, and you can see that shifting of the sharpness for the Tamron from the bottom left to the top right. So let's switch to, I'm not going to compare f11 as the same as I told you. Let's switch to 50mm now. Okay, so we are at 50mm now, comparing both lenses wide open. Let's see in the center. I think at 50mm wide open, the two lenses are probably equally sharp. Maybe the Tamron is still a little bit sharper, although it's at f2.8. It's just this lens is incredible in the center. The bottom left corner, I would give it here for the Sony. You can see the Sony is sharper. Same thing with the top left. But at the top right corner, as we saw at the 35, I think, not the very extreme corner, but you see that text, the white and red text on the blue background. You see this, the Tamron is probably slightly sharper, although it's at 2.8. Let's see at the bottom right corner. I think here Sony is the sharper. Although if we're not talking about the very extreme corners, the Tamron is performing quite well here. You can see that V. Okay, let's switch to f4 and compare the two lenses again. At f4 50mm, you can see like the difference between the sharpness is obvious. The Tamron is just killing it. It's absolutely sharp. You can see that food text and the puzzle text. It's just amazingly sharp. You can see the rabbit. Let's see the corners. I still give slight advantage to Sony, although it's not that much, but still you can clearly see that the Sony is sharper in the corners. Let's see the top right corner. As I told you, here you can see the Tamron started to gain sharpness, and I think it's definitely sharper now at 50mm at f4 than the Sony. And that will continue, as you'll see, till probably the entire video. You'll see that even here we have the Tamron sharper. See that V, although that's not the extreme corner, but so it seems to me that all the time the Tamron is sharper in the center, and then with increasing the focal length, the sharpness of the corners move from the bottom left to top right and top and bottom right, like to the right side a little bit from left to right. Okay, let's compare at f5.6. and see if that will change. Sun is getting sharper, but still the Tamron wins in the center. Sony wins at the corner, this corner as well. Now we see a significantly difference between the two lenses. The Tamron at f5.6 is just killing Sony in the top right corner. I don't know, is that a weakness of the Sony optics, or just the Tamron switches the best spot with the different lengths? See, that's pretty much for the entire right side. You see the Tamron is sharper. Again, I did not change the camera position, the lens position, on anything, just rotating the rings to the different lengths, so there is no change at all. Okay, let's switch to f8. At f8, I think they're pretty much the same in the center. Maybe split hearing, the Tamron is sharper, but it's very, very slight advantage. And the left side, I think the Sun still wins. You can see the text here is definitely sharper, crispier. And the opposite on the right side, the Tamron wins from top to bottom. That's the same for f11. So let's switch to 75 millimeters now. Okay, at 75 millimeters, actually that's 70 millimeter. I decided to not go all the way to 75, as usually 70 is a major focal length, so I decided to compare this time at 70 millimeters. You can see at 70 millimeters, as this approaches the end of the focal length of the Tamron, the Sony starts to gaining sharpness here. So I would say that the Sony is probably slightly sharper. You see that white text on the brown, the Sony is definitely sharper, even in the center. It is sharper on the left side, but let's not forget that the Tamron is at f2.8, so we'll compare now both lenses at f4 just to see. But I think wide open at 70 millimeter, the Sony is sharper everywhere. So let's switch. And I'm going to keep the f4 for Sony and just switch the Tamron to f4. Okay. Let's look in the center. Yeah, I think at f4 the Tamron restores its sharpness a bit. So it is sharper in the center. The Sony is slightly sharper in the corner. Actually, yeah, on the right side they're pretty much even. From top to bottom, I don't see any major difference. So let's switch to f5.6 for the two lenses. Let's see the center now. Actually, I should not compare the purple and yellow text now, because that's not in the center. The center is that kitchen text, where the Sony, I think, is slightly sharper, but almost the same. Sony really performs very well at 70 millimeters. Again, it's sharper in the corners, and kind of the same, or maybe the Tamron is a bit sharper here now at f4. Yes, I think the Tamron wins at f4 on the right side. Let's switch to f8. And for the Tamron, pretty much the same. The Sony is sharper in this corner too. So again, I would give the left side to Sony and the right side to Tamron at 70 millimeters. Not big of a difference, but slightly sharper. Sony is at the left side and the Tamron is slightly sharper on the right side. So let's conclude. Again, I think the Tamron definitely beats Sony in the center in almost all focal lengths, all different apertures. It is just significantly sharper in the center. Sony in general wins in the corners, but the Tamron has some advantages. At 28 millimeter, it's slightly sharper at the bottom left corner, and then it switches to the right side, top right and then the entire right side. In general, I think if you're shooting single objects in the middle, like portraits or some events, weddings, the Tamron will be the excellent choice, as the sharpness in the center is outstanding. And if you need more even sharpness throughout the frame, the Sony will give you that. Probably that will excel in landscapes and different like group objects from left to right. Overall, I think the Sony is more balanced lens, and adding the wider range that it offers from 24 to 105 I think is the better choice still. But again, the Tamron is an excellent lens, especially if you're okay with the center sharpness. You can see the blog and see the detail shots and make your mind. I will put the link below. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.